Welcome to this virtual info day on the call for status for cross-border renewable energy projects. My name is Beatrice Coda. I'm the head of unit in CINEA dealing with the CEF Energy program. And alongside with my colleagues of CINEA and DG ENER, I would like to open this info day that is focused on what we call the status call. A status call is a particular, let's say, call which is, let's say, necessary as in order to be eligible for studies and works under the cross-border renewable energy window of CEF Energy. The first step is to be successful in the so-called status call and be included in the list of cross-border projects in cross-border RES. Today, this morning, you will hear all about it. And we have a nice program for you, a very complete one. So we will go first with an introduction on, of the policy context of cross-border renewable program in the context of the Green Deal, and this will be given by Lukasz Koliński from DG ENER. Then we'll go a bit in more detail on the CBRES program and the financial framework of Connecting Europe facility, followed by more specific presentations in terms of the eligibility criteria and the specific requirements of the CBRES application, and in particular the cost-benefit analysis. This presentation will be given by our colleague of DG ENER, Vasil Stoyanov, and then we'll go through, let's say, more practical on the evaluation and the selection process of the call. This presentation will be given by my colleague Gianluca Ferreri. We'll break here into a moment where we take let's say, your questions. You have probably seen that we have a Slido hashtag, which is CBRES. So please don't hesitate to put your questions in the Slido. So it's CEF Energy CBRES. And we'll take all the questions of the first part of the program at the break, so around 11 o'clock. And after this 10 minutes break, we'll go through a more practical session. So really which will give you potential applicants tips and tricks how to prepare a successful applications. So in particular, how to draft a quality proposal for the call. Again, Gianluca will give this presentation. A more practical, let's say, insights on how to submit your proposal in the online portal, which has been developed for this call. And this presentation will be given by Teresa Koenig, my colleague in CINEA. And then we'll finish with the call timeline. And again, at the end of this second part of presentations, we will take a final Q&A sessions with you. So this is, let's say, the program for today. And without further ado, I give the floor to Lukasz Koliński, the head of unit responsible for renewable energy policy in DG ENER, to highlight the policy context of cross-border renewables. Thank you, Lukasz.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Good morning, everyone. I will say just a few words about the very important context, policy context that we have for the development of renewable energy in the European Union. And very clearly, CBRES is firmly set within this, this legislative strong and stronger framework. So it all starts with a Green Deal, which is the flagship initiative of the current Commission, adopted still in 2019. That gives the very general context for climate and energy policies of the European Union with a very, very tangible, I would say, objective, which is achievement of the climate neutrality by 2050. And everything that we have done since then as regards the legislation on the climate and energy front is focused on putting the European Union on the trajectory to this very, very ambitious objective. So the things, the The milestones, which are most important here, is the adoption of the Fit for 55 package, which included the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. This revision has modernized, expanded, and strengthened the rules which are at the European level providing the framework for the deployment of renewables. And obviously, these rules now, they all point to the achievement of higher amounts of renewables. And this is, again, very important from the point of view of CBRES, because that shows you that our policy over time is getting more and more ambitious. But it's not only the long-term policy framework that is becoming stronger. As you perfectly know, we faced the energy crisis these last years due to shortages of gas supply. We have seen the electricity prices going up. And now, why do I mention it? I mention it because the renewables played a part of the response to this crisis. And in the meantime, we have adopted an emergency regulation whose objective is to accelerate, in the short term, the rollout of renewables, mainly by making their permitting much simpler and much shorter across the European Union. So summing up, we have the long-term framework, which is becoming much more favorable for renewables. And within this framework, we have also short-term emergency rules, which are directly applicable in all the member states, which already today make it much easier to set up renewable installations within the countries, but also in between the countries. Can I have next slide, please? One of the key aspects of this revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, which, by the way, has entered into force at the beginning of this week, on the 20th of November, is the increased renewable energy target for the year 2030. So we are aiming at achieving 42.5% of renewables in the energy mix across the European Union. Is it much? It is very, very ambitious, because when you look at the current situation, we are talking about basically doubling the current share in less than 8 years. I mentioned already this emergency regulation, which has already kicked in last December, and then together again with the directive, all this is pushing the rapid rollout of solar and wind energy projects. We focus obviously on direct electrification, but at the same time, this directive is looking also to other aspects related to renewables, like, for example, stepping up the consumption of renewable hydrogen across the EU, like increasing the energy system integration, and also importantly, the penetration of renewables in all these sectors where so far perhaps they haven't rolled out as quickly as in electricity. And I mean here heating and cooling. Think about heat pumps, for example. I mean transport, and I mean also industry here. So all this is covered by our new legislative framework, and therefore, again, this is pretty relevant for the projects financed from CBRES, CEF. Next, please. So now, zooming in a little bit, looking at this policy framework and looking at the policy objectives from the perspective of this program. First of all, the directive says that we need to promote cooperation between the member states and also between the member states and the third countries. And you have this in the current rules, you have this in the new rules as well, with even stronger provisions. What objectives do we want to achieve there? Well, first of all, obviously, we want to contribute with these projects to this long-term decarbonization strategy leading towards climate neutrality. We want to roll out enough capacities to meet the 2030 target. And you see here in the left upper corner that we are talking about over 1,000 gigawatts that we will need according to our projections, mainly in wind and solar, compared to 400 gigawatts today. So this is a massive increase, and basically it is a very, very bright outlook for any renewable project promoters. We are not only talking, as I mentioned, about simple power generation. We're talking also about projects which facilitate integration of this generation into the energy system. So think about energy storage, think about power to X, power to hydrogen, or even transformation of hydrogen into, for example, synthetic fuels. At a certain point, think about all types of elements that will link up different parts of the energy system and make it more efficient. And finally, a very, very important point. We want to use this instrument in order to promote more innovation in the sector, because we realize that although the innovation pace in renewables has been rather quick, we need more technologies, we need more efficient technologies, and this is what we want to use this program for as well. In this new directive that is in force, we have now a new indicative target of 5% for innovative technologies. This is at least 5%, but it's very important because that gives a signal that across the whole European Union, we want to roll out more renewable technologies. And again, we have the financing for it. And I will stop here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Beatrice.
Thank you very much, Łukasz, for providing this policy context. And now let's go a little bit deeper into the CBRES program in the context of the EU financing for renewables. So Łukasz has just recalled the ambitious targets and the ambitious timeline to achieve these targets, and also mentioned that CBRES is in fact one of the instruments to make sure, let's say, that we can use to make sure that the objectives of the RES deployment are met. Now, there are several also funding opportunities and funding sources to incentivize the deployment of renewables. And at CINEA, we also manage some of the key funding programs that aim to support renewables development and deployment, and overall to deliver against the clean energy transition. So CEF Energy and the CBRES program is one of them, among others, like, for example, the Horizon Europe, which is more focused on the development and research and innovation, on the RenewFM, Renewable Energy Financing Mechanism, which is also a mechanism to support the cooperation among member states, and then other programs like the Innovation Fund, which is specifically dedicated to large-scale demonstration of non-commercially viable technologies, and last but not least, the LIFE clean energy transition, which is dedicated to energy efficiency and clean energy projects. Let's focus to the Connecting Europe facility in the framework 2021-2027, so the current, what we call, multi-financial framework. Overall, the objectives of the CEF program, which is dedicated, let's say, to three sectors: transport, digital, and energy, is to develop and modernize the trans-European networks in the three specific fields, with, let's say, the alignment to the Green Deal to push the decarbonization commitments, and therefore putting into, let's say, into the ground really projects and infrastructure which aim to support the Green Deal objectives, but also with emphasis on synergies across the three sectors. And if we look at in particular the CEF Energy program, we have, let's say, in the CEF Energy program, there are commitments for 5.84 billion euro. One sector in CEF Energy is dedicated to what we call the projects of common interest, so the trans-European network in the energy sector, which are in particular so energy networks and infrastructure projects. And the second sector, and that's what we are focusing here today, is the so-called cross-border projects in the field of renewable energy, which is focused on cross-border cooperation in renewable energy generation. And if we look at the state of play of the CEF Energy program until so far, and CEF Energy, let me also say, that exists since 2014. So we have accumulated quite a lot of experience and quite a lot of projects have been financed from the start of the program. We can see that CEF cross-border renewable energy sector is a new sector, so we are at the start of this new program. So far we have financed only 5 actions, but overall of the 5.8 billion euro available until 2027, we are still, let's say, halfway in terms of timeline, but in terms of budget, we still plan to invest until the end of the program more than 4 billion euro. And overall, for the cross-border renewable energy projects or program, up to 850 million euro are reserved for this specific sector, subject to market uptake. So there is still a lot of potential to let's say, to apply and to promote further this specific window. And we also plan as Commission and CINEA to open at least once a year what we call the status call, and that's where we will focus today, and then the call for CEF grants and for works and studies for the projects which are eligible following, let's say, the successful status application. So I mentioned already the budget of the CBRS program, and the legal basis is also recalled here. So Lukasz also mentioned the Renewable Energy Directive revised by what we call the RED 3, which just entered into force. And pay attention to the CEF regulation, the Commission delegated regulation, which is mentioned here, which is the legal basis for the selection of projects under the cross-border RES window, and then the Commission staff working document, which is the methodology of the cost-benefit analysis, and we will touch upon it in a moment. Now, let's focus on the CBRS process. So in order, and that's very, let's say, let me say a bit more practical presentation here. So how does it work to let's say, to apply for funding under this specific CEF energy window? So first of all, as I mentioned at the beginning, there must be an application for CBRS status received. And this is what we are focusing today on, let's say, what is an application for CBRS, what is the evaluation in this process, how the projects are selected. And once these projects are selected following the evaluation, the Commission will adopt a list of CBRS eligible projects. And this list will be adopted, will be, let's say, published, will enter into force after also scrutiny of Parliament and Council. And once, let's say, this list is in place, then CINEA will open call for works and studies funding. So the application for CBRS status is a process without funding. The second step is the application for works and studies funding. So there are 2 separate and distinct calls. Now, which type of projects can apply to the CBRS call? So which are the eligible projects? Projects, they must refer to a renewable energy generation based on any renewable energy source as per the RES directive. The applications of this renewable energy generation, they can be, let's say, in all sectors. So it can be for electricity, for transport, heating and cooling. Other type of, let's say, components, like, for example, storage, IT systems, a grid connection, for example, they are also eligible with the condition that they form an integral part of the project. So they are linked to the renewable energy generation, and they are ancillary to the renewable generation facility. To be noted also that there is no predefined capacity threshold, location, or technology type. So we, let's say, any type of project, from small ones to very large ones, are welcomed in the call, are eligible in the call. Technology also, Lucas recalled that any technology, again, in line with the Renewable Energy Directive is welcome, including the innovative one. So, so today, as I mentioned, we focus on the status call, and the status is a precondition to apply for the CEF calls for technical studies and works. But let's say also, and I think this is an important point, that once you get the status, this makes, let's say, your project also more visible. In particular, for example, if you want to, for example, look for additional financing sources, like from, I don't know, EIB or other financial institutions, or also for local acceptance. So you have like a sort of European label of project, and therefore, let's say, it offers, let's say, more visibility. Today we focus on the status call. We'll go later on the timeline. Let us, however, say already now that once, let's say, the call for status is finished and the evaluation is completed and the list will be published, we will open a next call for CBRES status towards, let's say, more the end of next year, 2024. So just for you to know that the projects which will be successful and, let's say, will be in the list will be only able to apply basically in 1 year time. We have now a call open for studies and works, so it's the call, at least the call is published and it's forthcoming. It's the call 2023. And so the next, for studies and work, so the next one will be more or less in 1 year time. Just to give you, let's say, information on which are the projects that have so far received the status. So you see that there are projects across several geographic locations in Europe and also several different technology. So one, for example, is ULP-RES WP. It's an onshore wind park between the northern part of Latvia and the southern part of Estonia. We have, let us continue also with the wind project. So L-Wind, it's an offshore wind project involving Estonia and Latvia, again, with a hybrid grid connection, including with interconnector and transmission line. The size of the project is expected to be 1 gigawatt. Slow P will also produce electricity and hydrogen through offshore wind with radial collection in Riga, with financial contribution from Luxembourg. So it's a cross-border project between Estonia and Luxembourg. And then we have two totally different projects. So one is between Poland and Germany, and it is between the two twin cities of Görlitz and Zsozselec. And they are investing and developing a RES heat generation and connected to its district heating networks with a cross-border pipeline. And last but not least, it's a project on, let's say, focusing on a large European hydrogen value chain. It's called the Cicerone. And the core of this project is to build new additional renewable power plants in Italy and Spain with the idea to, or the objective to convert, let's say, this electricity to green hydrogen and ammonia. And part of this ammonia will be then shipped to and used for off-takers in the Netherlands, and other part will be reconverted to hydrogen and used in Germany. So that's, let's say, a very large pan-European project. So you see that here we focus, let's say, on, let me say, relatively small-scale projects, like the one between the two twin cities, cross-border wind parks, big hydrogen value chain. So let's say there are several possibilities, let's say, for the status. So there is in principle no specific requirements, as I mentioned before, in terms of size and in terms of technology. And last but not least, let's go to this tool that we have developed, so where it's what we call a transparency platform, CBRS transparency platform. So it's a public viewer, an interactive public viewer, where you can, go on this map and look interactively also for the information on the projects that have received the status. If you click, let's say, on the map, you will be able to find and look, let's say, for the specific symbols. The projects that receives the status are also monitored by CINEA, and there is public information available also on the status of their implementation, if you are interested. With this last information, I want to close my intervention. And let's go deeper, really, on what are the requirements to apply for the call. And I'm very pleased to give the floor to our colleague in the GNR, Vasyl Stoynov, also working in the Renewable Energy Policy Unit, to go a bit deeper into the cooperation mechanisms and the requirements for the cost-benefit analysis. Vasyl, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Beatrice, and good morning to all participants in this info day. My name is Vasyl Stoynov, and I work in the unit on renewables in the GNR. Quick confirmation that I'm heard well and seen well.
Yes, very good.
Thank you very much. So my presentation today would be to try to give you a quick snapshot of what a project needs to be in order to qualify as cross-border renewable energy project. So the first slide is about what type of projects are we looking at selecting as cross-border projects. We're looking at individual projects which has physical cross-border impact. So this is the most straightforward example, which means a renewable project which is located at the border of two countries, either in one or on the territory of both, and is connected to both grids and both electricity systems. These are the majority of the projects that you have seen in the list of Beatrice, which currently have the status. The next example is a bit more complicated, which is again for individual project, however, without a cross-border physical contact. This is a virtual cross-border project, which means a project which is connecting two countries which are not near one each other, and whereby one country participates in the development of the project, for example, by providing funds and receiving statistical transfers in exchange of that. A third example is this is the most sophisticated example for multiple projects, and the example for that will be a joint support scheme between two countries, which is awarding support to multiple projects. On the next slide, I would like to now say a few words on the technologies which need to be covered by a project in order to be eligible. So when you hear a cross-border renewable energy project, you, of course, understand that this project needs to entail renewable energy generation. But this is a very important part of the requirements. Each project that applies and receives a status of cross-border renewable project must have utilization and production of renewable energy through one of the renewable energy sources listed in the Renewable Energy Directive as a central part of the project. So the project is all about producing any type of renewable source, any type of technology which is recognized by the directive. However, a project can include also other components. So beyond the renewable generation, there could be storage, there could be conversion of the renewable electricity into a fuel, there could be connection to the grid. However, we have three general requirements for those additional components. First, that they form integral part of the project. This means that the additional non-renewables component is linked to the renewables. If there is a grid, the grid needs to connect precisely the renewable generation to the system. It should not be disconnected. If it's a conversion facility, the conversion facility must have as a source of electricity precisely the renewable installation of the renewable generation plant. Second, these additional components needs to enable the integration. This means that they don't have to serve their own purpose commercially, financially, or systematically, but they need to make sure that the electricity or the renewable energy which is produced is then integrated into the system. And thirdly, those components are ancillary, meaning that they are the second level of importance in the project. The big part of the project and the main component of the project should be the renewable electricity generation. And if there are other components, there needs to be ancillary. We usually receive questions, how do we interpret these rather general examples and criteria. We have some specific examples that we give in the frequently asked questions. And we provided this flexibility intentionally so that we can capture all type of project setups. But I hope that you understood well the general concept and the ideas. On the next slide, I would like to mention which are the legal requirements. So those requirements that come from the Connecting Europe Facility regulation. Those requirements are three. However, logically, there are actually two. So a project, in order to qualify as cross-border renewable project, needs to deploy one of the eligible technologies that I explained and needs to meet two main criteria. The first one is that this project is based and implemented through a cooperation agreement or other kind of agreement between at least two countries. And the second criteria is that this project needs to have net benefits, socioeconomic net benefits. This is actually a combination of criteria 2 and 3, and I'm going to explain you in detail. So let's start with the first criterion. What does it mean that projects need to be based on cooperation agreement? On the next slide, I'm going to explain this. So the Renewable Energy Directive provides for 4 types of cooperation mechanisms: statistical transfer, joint project, either between countries in the EU or between a country in the EU and a third country, and joint support scheme. I'm not going to explain you what those are, but a renewable energy project which applies for CBRS status needs to utilize at least one of those options. On the next slide, I'm going to show you how do we understand and how do we interpret these requirements. Next slide, please. So we need to receive from a project promoter a proof that at least 2 countries are willing to cooperate with each other on the basis of this specific project and support the application of this project to the CBRS status. This means that we do not require a fully fledged cooperation agreement signed by the ministries covering all aspects of the project. No, we're looking for much easier requirement, and this requirement is that we receive a written declaration coming from the ministries, the relevant ministries of at least the 2 participating countries. And this written declaration needs to have 2 messages. First, we are willing to conclude the cooperation agreement in future in order to set up this specific cooperation project. And secondly, we're supporting the application of this project to the Connecting Europe Facility program. This, however, needs to be done on the level of the concrete project. So we don't look at memorandums of understanding for cooperation in the area of renewables. No, it has to be on the basis of this specific concrete project that is applying. To make the life both of the promoters and the ministries easier, we have developed a non-binding template, which you can find on the webpage of CINEA, whereby it's literally 1 page with a couple of sentences, which, if filled in by the ministries, meets those requirements that I have just mentioned. So this is for the cooperation agreement. Now let's move to the more complicated thing, which is the socioeconomic net benefits. What does this mean? This means the logic behind this requirement is that a project promoter needs to prove to the Commission and to CINEA that the cooperation project and a renewable energy project, which is developed by two countries, has more benefits, holistically speaking, from a nationally developed project, meaning the cooperation agreement and the cooperation mechanisms provides added value, which justifies the support that this project will receive from the European Commission. How is this idea reflected? It's done through a cost-benefit analysis, so analytical exercise, which covers 7 elements, and therefore comes the socioeconomic level. So it's not about simply cost of electricity or some other component. It's 7 indicators covering a wide range of aspects, for which we have prepared a dedicated methodology. Important is that when a project promoter applies for CBRS status, it follows strictly this methodology, because this methodology is the way that we, Commission and project promoters, understand those 7 broad indicators in the same manner, and this methodology ensures comparability and consistency of our assessment. So we cannot deviate from this methodology, and this methodology, even if it's not legal, it's kind of binding the Commission's assessment and also your application. So let's look into this methodology. On the next slide, the objective is clear. We want to see whether the project creates an added value. We have 7 indicators, 5 of them are monetized, meaning that the assessment of the cost-benefit analysis is then translated into euros. And we have 2 indicators which are qualitative only, so no numbers, simply explanations. The end result of this assessment needs to be a number expressed in euro. This number will be either positive, which means that the project has net benefits, or negative, which means that it doesn't have net benefits and the costs of this project are more. So let's look into how this looks. On the next slide, yes, please. Yes, that's it. So how is it structured? For each indicator, the project promoter calculates what are the benefits and what are the costs in line with the methodology. I'm going to explain exactly how this is calculated. Then the CBRS project, for all the 7 indicators calculated together, derives to a number which is the net present value of the project. So the benefits minus the costs leads to a number, which is number in euros, which is the net present value of the project. Then the project promoter performs the same exercise with the counterfactual. So this is a hypothetical project. I will explain you how to set up this counterfactual. But counterfactual is a hypothetical project which is also assessed against those 7 criteria. And again, for each criteria, the costs and the benefits are calculated. And then the project developer arrives to a net present value number, which is for the counterfactual, so for the hypothetical project. And then the project promoter compares the net present value of the project that applies and the hypothetical project. And there is a delta between the two. If this delta is positive, means that the project that applies has benefits compared to a hypothetical situation, and the project has met this criteria, the socioeconomic net benefits. If the delta is negative, this means that the hypothetical project would have more benefits, and therefore the project does not meet the criteria. So this is important, that the delta between the end results of the cost-benefit analysis is measured, not the delta between each separate indicator. With this, I'm going to move to the next slide, where I will present a bit more in detail the counterfactual. Now, this is a rather important, and also this has been a source of confusion in the past. The counterfactual is this hypothetical project. So the CEF regulations says in the legal text that the benefits of the project need to be assessed in comparison to a similar project or renewable energy project implemented by only one of the member states alone. So what does this mean? The project that applies, this is the reference project, is compared to a hypothetical project which would have been implemented only by one of the countries. So without the cross-border aspect, without the cooperation aspect. We have 2 examples or two scenarios for that. We have the standardized counterfactual and the case-specific counterfactual. Important, the standardized counterfactual has a priority. If a member state can set up a standardized counterfactual, it should go for that. If the project promoter can. What is the standardized counterfactual? This means comparing apples with apples. We have an offshore wind project, which is located on the territory of two countries, and we compare it to offshore wind project with the same technology, with the same capacity, which is implemented by only one of the participating countries, right? So instead of looking at a project which is developed jointly by two countries, we look at the same project with the same setup, the same technology, the same capacity, implemented by one of the countries alone. And we compare these 7 indicators for that scenario. The logic is that this comparison shows whether the project developed by one member state alone has actually more benefits than the project being developed by a cross-border cooperation. Because in this case, the cooperation doesn't have an added value. Okay, this is for the standardized. Now, this is not always possible. It cannot be possible simply because the project is located in one country and the contributing country, as we call it, the country which simply participates by paying money and investing into the project, doesn't have the same conditions. For example, it's an offshore wind project, and the counterfactual is for a country which does not have access to offshore wind. Or it can be simply because one project is developed in a country where there is availability of data as regards the LCOE, the environmental impact, and so on of the project, and the counterfactual will be in a country where simply there is no market for such projects, or because the country is so small that the same capacity and the same size will not be applicable in the first place. If there is a proper justification for that, we use the case-specific counterfactual, which means we compare apples with pears. But in this case, we ask this justification to be sufficiently justified in the first place, and then this comparison needs to be realistic, meaning the case-specific counterfactual shows what could realistically happen if the cross-border project was not developed, and instead the contributing country has developed its own renewable energy project, which will be as close as possible to the cross-border renewable energy project. So this could be, for example, an offshore wind project developed by a country which does not have offshore potential, but reaches the same amount of electricity generation through a combination of onshore wind and solar, for example. In our methodology, we give very clear indications how exactly to choose in which country this project is located and what are the boundary conditions for this hypothetical assessment. Okay, let's move on now to the content of the cost-benefit analysis. It has 7 elements, as I explained. I will go quickly through each of those elements. The first element is the cost of energy. Translated, this means what is the LCOE of the electricity produced by the cross-border project and the electricity produced by the counterfactual, the hypothetical project. Points of attention here. You should look at where does the calculation come from. We need to know whether it's your own calculations. We need to know where it's based on a specific study. For us as Commission and CINEA, it's important not simply to look at a number, but to know where the number comes from. To make it easier, we have provided you with a rather standard formula about LCOE calculation. This comes from methodologies of European Investment Bank, so it's a standard one. I'm not going to go into it. So this is about the cost of energy. This is quite straightforward. Important is to know how did you derive to this number of the LCOE. Next slide is about the second indicator, which is system integration. This indicator replies to the question, how much would it cost to integrate this renewable electricity or energy which is generated into the overall energy system? And we look at 3 types of costs: profile costs, balancing costs, and grid-related costs. For each of those, in our methodology, we have provided you guidance from where you can extract this data and those numbers, and what proxies to use in order to calculate those costs. On the next slide, I'm presenting the third element, which is the cost of support. This element corresponds to the question, how much would it cost to the public in order to support this project? Keep in mind that this number from this indicator is not added into the total calculation. This is simply an indicator which serves the CINEA and the Commission to know what would be the overall cost of the project. So point of attention, it should be calculated in renewables, in euros, but not part of the overall calculation. And the calculation of support for the CBRS project includes the grant that the project could receive and could ask from the funding from our program, plus any other national support that it receives. And in the case of the counterfactual, it's simply any public support that the project will receive, either from an auction, either from a feed-in tariff, or tax exemption, or anything. Next element on the next slide is number 4, which is the, please to the next slide, which is the greenhouse gas emission avoidance. So this indicator replies to the question, what are the benefits of a project in terms of avoided greenhouse gas emissions? So this indicator is developed through a 3-stage approach. First stage is to measure the greenhouse gas effects of the project itself, so the avoided greenhouse gas emission, but measured into CO2 equivalent terms. So we translate the greenhouse gases to CO2. Then we establish the avoided greenhouse gas emissions. So we compare the energy system of a country where the cross-border project is located with or without the additional electricity renewable, which would be 0 greenhouse gas emissions. And we see how much greenhouse gas emissions have been avoided through the project that generates more renewable electricity instead of other type of source. Then we do the same also with the counterfactual. And then the third step is to monetize the avoided emission simply by multiplying them to the cost of the carbon as estimated. And for this estimation and also for the translation, we are giving you clear indications in the methodology. So in order to express the greenhouse gas emissions into CO2, we suggest that you use the global warming potential factors, which are established in the IPCC. Then we use the greenhouse warming potential values, which are in the 5th assessment report in the IPCC. And for the monetization of the avoided emission, we suggest that you use EIB methodology, which has a prospect of how much the costs of CO2 will increase in the future. So greenhouse gas emission is to give a value and a number on the avoided CO2 emissions. And the CO2 emissions are the proxy for the actual greenhouse gas emissions. Good. Next slide, which is the, here I just mentioned this, that we are giving you a specific indication on how to calculate the emission saving of the project. So this will be the difference between the project's emission and the emission of equivalent project. And you use the emission factors in order to calculate those avoided emissions. So on the next slide, I would like to show the security of supply. So this indicator replies to the question, how much is the value of the change of energy imports in the primary consumption of this respective sector? So security of supply can mean many things, but we have simplified it. And please, the project promoter needs to assume that all the quantities of the renewable energy which are produced by the Cross-border Renewable Energy Project are also consumed domestically. And then to estimate this additional domestically consumed renewable energy is replacing an import from a third country. And the methodology explains how the project promoter values these lowered imports because of the energy, which is the output of the project. The 6th indicator is on the next slide, is the air and local pollution. Here, the logic is quite similar to the logic of the greenhouse gas emissions. Again, we use only 3 air polluters, which are seen on this slide, and we use an established emission factors of these polluters. So for each kilowatt hour of produced renewable electricity, there is a reduction of air pollution of certain kilograms of air pollution. And then we multiply those decreased emission of the pollutants by economic costs of each unit, and therefore we arrive at the monetized air pollution, meaning the monetized avoided emissions from these 3 polluting factors. On the next slide, we are showing you the last example, which is the innovation. Innovation can mean, again, many things. We are not asking you to monetize this aspect. This is the quantitative aspect, whereby we expect from the project promoters to provide us a description. What are the benefits in terms of technological innovation? Here, one example could be that the project promoter justifies how the project and the technology that it's utilizing is consistent with the NECP objectives for research innovation or the set objectives of the set plan of each country. The other aspect of innovation is policy innovation. So here the project promoter can explain how the cooperation agreement is overcoming barrier for cooperation, or how the project is adding to exchange of good practices. And again, we're not looking at a number here, we're looking at justification, which shows why the cooperation aspect of the project gives it advantage to the counterfactual, which is a national project only. With this, I'm finishing my presentation, and back to you, Beatrice, for concluding the next session from the workshop. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to come back to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Vasil. And we'll go through now the evaluation process and the selection criteria. So we'll have a look at what are the steps of the evaluation once you have submitted your application, and then we'll take the Q&A, and then we will enter into more deeper in some examples on how really how to draft good evaluation, good quality proposals, and look at what are the typical mistakes we have seen so far in the first call. So in the next slide, we will see the overall process. So basically, once the projects are submitted, there will be preliminary checks, sort of eligibility and admissibility checks, and then the proper evaluation. And once the evaluation is done, there will be the adoption of the final list, or the amended list. Okay, so in the preliminary checks, what do we look at? Basically, whether the application is submitted on time via the submission platform. We'll look at it later during today. It is complete, and we will have a look at what does it mean complete. What are the documents that we expect? It is readable, accessible, and printable. Is drafted in one of the official language, even though we strongly advise to submit in English, because that facilitates also the evaluation. And you have been using the mandatory templates. You will see there are some templates which are mandatory, and others which are more for sort of a courtesy version. So the annex is, there is one part, the application form directly filled in the platform, and in the same platform you will be able to upload annexes. So the first important annex is the Annex 1, which is the cross-border as tool, calculation tool, which is the Excel tool that calculates your CBA, your proper project CBA and counterfactual CBA. So in this tool, which is a mandatory one, you will see every steps to calculate basically the 7 elements, or 5 which are quantifiable, and the 2, as Vasily explained, 2 qualitative ones. And the tool automatically calculates your net present value starting from elements and data that you can input in it. The Annex 2 is if you want the narrative part, you will have a first section where you can explain the wider context of your project, the market context, for example, the country context, the technology, state of play, and this type of element, and the technical specification of your project. So really the setup, what is the technology, the location, who is supposed to do what, and so on and so forth. And the second part, which is the narrative elements of the CBA. So in the Annex 1 and Annex 2, they integrate each other, in the sense that in Annex 1 we will find the calculation directly, so the mathematical calculation. And in the Annex 2, take the advantage of the form to explain very clearly what are your assumptions, what are your reasoning, what are your sources, for example, for the calculation. So it's really the narrative explanation of your CBA calculation. Then Annex 3, which is the written declaration of the participating country. Here you have a template that you may use, or in case you have already a cooperation agreement or an equivalent document providing similar information as of the template, you can use your own document. Still, it's essential that you upload your declaration of the participating member states regarding their willingness to enter into a cooperation agreement on the basis of your project, or if you have it already, a fully fledged cooperation agreement, which can take various forms. It can be a memorandum of understanding, it can be another type of declaration, but should include a minimum of series of elements that we can have a look later. And then the Annex 4, which is the Sustainability and DNASH compliance file, so do not significant harm. This template is mandatory, and fill it in as it is. And we already anticipate that you might have difficulties in filling in all sections, so it depends, of course, in the state of maturity of your project. So, but give us the state of play at the moment of your submission. So don't worry if some aspect cannot be answered by the moment of the submission, but give us the latest state of play. So when it comes to the type of applicant that can apply, it's basically very open. You need to have a legal personality, so it has to be a legal entity, being public or private or any sort of hybrid forms there, but it has to be a legal entity, not a natural person only, and be established in either an EU member state or in a non-EU member state. So here, of course, it depends on the type of cooperation mechanism you have chosen. But if you have chosen a cooperation mechanism that entails a joint project between EU and a member state and a third country, in that case, we are looking for also the declaration of the third country. In the next slide, you will see more into the cooperation mechanism, which was already explained by Vasil on what we are really looking for and what type of information we are ideally looking for. It's specified in the staff working document of the Commission, so the methodology that calculates the CBA, but also details the cooperation aspect. Also there, I mean, you will find elements, and these are sort of aspirational elements. You may not have all of them at the moment of the submission, but send us as much as you can. And especially, it should clearly be signed by the Ministry of the participating member states, or including transit countries where relevant, and express clearly the willingness to enter into cooperation agreement for that given project. So I insist that it cannot be a generic memorandum of understanding, for example, of cooperation between two countries on a given sector. It should be sufficiently clear that declaration refers to the CBRS project that you are submitting. So feel free to use the recommended template, of course, or any other form you may have already developed or being developed. In the next slide, you see the compliance with the selection criteria. So here we enter really a little bit more into the content, and we are looking to really find, first of all, is it a project that concerns energy generation based on renewable energy sources, and what type of renewable energy sources? These are the ones listed in the Renewable Energy Directive in Article 2, and as also as amended recently by the so-called RED 3, but the list doesn't change. So any type of sources that is contained in that list is actually eligible for CBRS funding. But it's really important that this must be the core element of the project. Then you can have any additional components, being, for example, for storage or other components, but they have to be, as Vasil was explaining, integral part of the project, enable the integration of the renewable, of the new renewable energy generation that would be built thanks to the project and should be ancillary to the renewable energy generation, meaning that it's twofold. It has to be necessary for the renewable energy generation to function correctly, and has to be to represent a small part of the project. So let's look into some fictional examples, just to give you some more concrete understanding of what do we mean by these components and these additional components. So you may have a scenario one that is fairly straightforward, where the project is about new renewable energy installation, say in geothermal or wind or solar, or you name it, in any of the renewable energy generation listed in the Renewable Energy Directive. In this case, the project is only focusing on the renewable energy generation, and it's clearly a case of eligible project in the CBRS program. Then the scenario two is a little bit different. We do have the two tiers, so the generation and, for example, a storage component. In this case, you have, for example, in cases of offshore projects, these projects usually have are composed of several elements, but you have one or several wind parks. The wind parks, they are connected to the transmission line, and the transmission line then brings the electricity elsewhere in hybrid project, at least in two countries. In this case, you can have a wider picture, and these elements can be part of the project, so the additional elements. We will look at it a little bit more into details later. But still, the renewable energy generation, first of all, it's new, so it's additional to the existing, it's not already existing, and it's the core aspect of your project. And then, so the other aspect being, for example, the connection from of the renewable energy generation to the grid, they can be part of the project. Maybe here anticipate one of the questions that we have seen already in Slido. So that is precisely about these aspects. So where the transmission lines connecting offshore wind power to shore, or offshore substation structures in, for example, energy, I presume maybe energy islands, should be eligible for CBRS investment. So in this case, you can have the whole project in the CBRS when you apply, so the whole picture in it. Then if the project is selected, imagine you will want to apply for CEF CBRS cost or projects or actions, supported action. You have two options. You have studies and works. In the case of studies, things are pretty more flexible. You can have the wider picture included in the study, because we understand that it doesn't make sense often to simply separate components of a project between the generation and, for example, the transmission. But when it comes to works, what would be eligible would be only the RES generation part and not the transmission. So there is a degree of flexibility for the study part, which is not necessarily be the case for the works part. But we can dig it into that more later on. In this slide, you see scenarios of possible non-eligible projects, and here you have a first case where the project concerns only the transmission or the storage part or any other additional components. And here you may have, for example, a project that supports the transmission of existing renewable energy installation, for example. And here the project would not be eligible for the CBRS project. And then you have also cases where it's completely out of scope, where the project does not concern at all renewable energy installation, so it doesn't even benefit a renewable energy installation, at least not directly. And in this case, even though the project might, for example, contribute to climate mitigation efforts, for example, think about carbon capture project, or hydrogen pipelines or CO2 pipelines, but as long as it is not linked to a new renewable energy installation, we will not be the right program for you. There are many others, and some also Beatrice quoted in the type of project, the program that CINEA manages, and other for sure other programs for that, but not the CBRS program. So the evaluation, and here I will stay generic, and then we will pause for a Q&A, and then we will go more deep in what do we mean technical soundness and of the project or the CBA. But basically, first of all, for you to have the picture, we look at the soundness of the project, meaning we look at really the technical aspect. Is it clear? What is the scope of the project? What is the location? What is the technology? Do we have all elements? So these aspects are thoroughly analyzed by the evaluators. Secondly, or second tier, equally important, the evaluators look at the soundness of the cost-benefit analysis, because ultimately the project has to be technically sound, yes, of course. It has to be qualitative. And at the same time, to be eligible for the program, the project needs to present credible net present value and higher and stronger net present value compared to the contrafactual project that Vasil was explaining in the previous presentation. So these are two pillars equally important, and these are really the core aspect of the analysis that is carried out by the expert when evaluating, concreting your project. We will look at it even more into details, and we will look at also what has been the recurrent mistakes or misunderstanding in the previous in the call so far, so in the previously submitted project. But before that, we'll go for a Q&A session, and then we'll break for a short coffee break. So the hashtag, you'll see it also on the screen, CEF Energy CBRS on Slido. Don't hesitate to post your question there, and we will open now the Q&A and go through one by one. And if you have questions later on during the break, don't hesitate, of course, to write them out. We will eventually start from there in the second part, and we have also plenty of time for the Q&A even at the end of the day of this info day. So maybe Beatrice, we open the Q&A.
Okay, so we start with the first. Are projects of power storage technology like PHS without any RES added directly to the project eligible for status of CBRS?
So yeah, in this case, it's a clear situation where it's only the ancillary part, so the storage part, that is contemplated in the project. So it would not be eligible. It is a different situation in the case where you consider to have new renewable energy installation that would need as an ancillary element hydropower storage. Here, of course, in that case, provided that the ancillary element they respect the condition that we have gone through, then the project can be a CBRS project. But without the new renewable energy installation, it wouldn't be eligible for the CBRS project. Yep. Go ahead. Yeah. So the next one, it's about so the one that I touched upon. So you can see on the slide about transmission line connecting offshore wind power to shore. In the case of hybrid interconnection, so where project you have, for example, 2 wind parks, one on one country and one on the other country territorial waters, and they are connected one another and then connected respectively to country A and country B. Then you have other elements, for example, substation structures. So all these elements can be part of a CBRS project. When you submit your CBRS project for status, then it provides you the full picture, and it's logical to explain the whole picture at this stage. But when you apply for CBRS funding, well, if you apply for a study, then you can include elements of grid connection or even substation or other elements. It often doesn't make sense to separate. But when it comes to works for CBRS project, will be only the renewable energy generation which is eligible for funding for works. Okay, so this is about the cooperation agreement. So you have in the staff working document a series of elements that we would like to see where possible in the cooperation agreement, and the question is about high-level climate change consideration under the section that you where you describe the project. So here there's no specific guidelines. It's really up to you, the maturity of your project, but it's to have a wider picture regarding the effect of your project or the potential benefit of your project in terms of, for example, mitigating climate change affecting the region. So by definition, renewable energy projects, they do have a positive impact in the mitigation, at least when it comes to, for example, GHG emission reduction, and also other pollutants that can have an impact in climate change. So here you can have these type of elements. But again, we understand that at the level of submission of your status project, these elements might be very high level. So I would say provide the elements you have, but don't necessarily worry to the extent that you are very detailed on this aspect.
So high level means general and not very specific.
Yeah, so it's general consideration. Yeah. So it's not high level in the sense of we're referring to who is, for example, behind these statements. So it's not about the level in the hierarchy, for example, or it doesn't mean that it has to be very specific. It's a general consideration about the potential impact of your project.
So not too detailed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can. So do you have some more information about choice of counterfactual when it is a hybrid project without obvious choice of country is fully booked out? So yeah, in the case of a hybrid offshore project, you have typically 2 or more countries. So here it's not straightforward what is so-called contributing country and what is the country where the project takes place, because, well, the project takes literally place in more than one country. You have a bit more freedom here to choose the counterfactual. It depends a little bit on the situation, but you can assume, for example, and we had cases where in the absence of the cooperation, in the absence of a hybrid project, you may have 2 separated wind parks in 2 countries with a different split of generation. That is one option. So, for example, thanks to your cross-border renewable hybrid project, you have, let's say, a distribution of generation country A 60% and country B 40%, whereas without the cooperation, you wouldn't be able to go for this because the areas would be different. For example, your wind park, and in that case, we may end up with a different distribution, let's say 70-30 or 50-50, whatever. And this has, of course, an impact when you will calculate your, for example, a GHG emission, because you have to base on your country-specific emission factor. So you can, for example, one strategy go for a hybrid, a pro rata allocation of your project that is different between the counterfactual and your project-specific case. This is one option. Or you can assume that the whole wind park, for example, would take place only in country A, and for whatever reason. But what is important, maybe it's even more important, that you explain very well what are your assumptions and what are the reasons of your choices. And if it makes sense and if it is clear, then it would be an important step towards a positive assessment on the counterfactual. So there is no strong rules on the counterfactual, especially for the hybrid, but it has to be clear and it has to make sense. So it has to be obviously not perceived as a strategy to get a bad counterfactual so that you have a very good net present value, especially the delta. So you have to clearly be transparent in the assumptions of your choices. So at which stage should the project be? Should it have started already, or could it be a discussion between country stage? So it's very unlikely that you have started. I mean, there are situations, of course, the maturity can be very, very different. There's no hard rule in the sense that it doesn't mean that you have started that you are not eligible for CBRS. But let's say the typical situation we have seen so far is that project haven't started yet really. Well, then it depends what do we mean by started. I mean, of course, you may have started already by doing some pre-feasibility studies or data collection, or even studies, physical studies to collect, say, for example, wind survey, if we are still talking about wind, or this type of elements. Often you need them to have the data necessary for to calculate your CBA, the cost-benefit analysis. There is no strong rule. The important aspect is that, and I come to the second element of your question, it's about the cooperation. So you have to start as early as possible the discussion at country level, because this takes a lot of time. I mean, it depends very much between countries, and there may be a situation where the framework is already set, there's a long tradition of cooperation in the sector, and so on and so forth. Then it can be very quick. But very, very often you need the time to inform the public administration or the ministry in questions. You need to take the time to get people around the table and so on and so forth. So this don't underestimate, anticipating a little bit some of the message we will bring later on, but don't underestimate the time for the cooperation to build. And then we are, as Vasil was explaining before, very flexible on the stage of maturity on the cooperation, in the sense that we are really accepting at the status level at least a declaration where the two parties, the two or more than two, they express the willingness to enter into a future cooperation agreement on the basis of the project. So it means it's declaration of intent, basically, to say we are interested on the project and we are willing to then enter into cooperation agreement, but it doesn't have to be already covering all aspects, who pays for what, who gets the benefit, who gets the energy, and so on and so forth.
So this one, will projects, parts of which must be implemented in Natura 2000 territory, be eligible to receive CBRS status and possible funding from CEF Energy calls? So here, in principle, what is important to mention is that every project with CBRS status and every project that receives EU funding, they must be compliant with EU law. So every project must be compliant also with the environmental law, and therefore, let's say, all the rules on environmental permitting, all the rules related to environmental impact assessments, and so on, they must be fully respected. So I'm not sure now what it means part of the project will be implemented in Natura 2000 territory. There might be, let's say, possible aspects to be taken into account in the preparation of the impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, and in delivery of the permit by the national competent authority. But so the bottom line is that yes, it is in principle possible to receive the status, and yes, it is possible to receive funding from the CEF Energy program, provided that the rules on the environmental European law are fully respected, and this we will also scrutinize the proposals for the status, and more important, at the moment where your project will receive, will apply for funding on CEF Energy. So we would like to see the declaration from the authority, the environmental impact assessment, or other, let's say, permits and so on. So, but bottom line, the reply is yes, with the caveat that apply to all projects under EU funding.
Okay, next question is the interaction, so to say, between, or the possible interaction between the CBRS support and the RFMBO, so delegated regulation about green hydrogen, not only green hydrogen, but also, and whether these can conflict with the possibility of a project to enter into, or to bid for auction of a hydrogen bank. In that case, so it's about the additionality principle. For this, as we need to double check with the hydrogen bank part, we will pose this question and see if we can come back to that, to the Q&A later, or in writing, in any case after the seminar. So this is a question about a project that is existing, but potentially with the CBRS will, for example, upgrade or expand. For example, that can be in the total capacity. So a project that builds up on the existing one, provided additional energy generation take place eligible for status, that's definitely a possibility. So yes, they are eligible. Of course, as it is in the question very clear, it has to be additional energy generation. So it has to be very clear. And when in these cases, since the project, part of the project exists, be very clear what is the scope of the CBRS project. So what is the existing part capacity, location, technology, etc., and what you will bring as an additional generation thanks to the project. So whenever the scope is clear, you can then calculate all the rest. So, but as a principle, as a setup, it is eligible. It can be possible in the CBRS program. So we have another question, but this on the market structure description and regards to how high level should be the market structure description be when describing two countries. So you have a hybrid project where you have two countries, and here, well, it's again a high level. We mean general description. How general? To say, well, it's difficult to say it in abstract, but when the evaluator looks at the project, needs to understand the overall context of the market. So often projects provide elements with regards to recent trends, for example, in terms of renewable installation, what is the potential of this country. When you go a little bit down on the technology, you can refer to elements like the efficiency of the given technology in that given country, what is the potential of that technology in the country, what is the market trend in terms of price of electricity, for example, what is the dependency of the country towards fossil fuels or towards renewable generation. So these are all elements that helps understand what is the context in which the project is inscribed. So, and what is the capacity, for example, of the country to integrate the project? Is it posing any risk in terms of grid capacity? This type of elements is to understand to which extent the project can fit the market and its or the country, and is bringing added value to the situation of the given country, be it one or two or more country. But yeah, of course, try to strike a balance there. So we are not looking for a fully detailed market analysis of each single country. So can the particular project be submitted for CBRS and apply for funding for studies and then transferred to PCI project for implementing for works?
Well, here to clarify, so the scope of CBRS is the renewable energy generation. So we have, I think, made very clear that what is eligible under CBRS is the energy from renewable sources, and then there could be additional components like storage, like grid connection, like conversion to renewable liquid and gaseous fuel, and so on. Now, PCIs are not related to renewable energy generation. So the list of infrastructure elements which is eligible for PCI projects and to get, let's say, the status. You can find it in the TENI regulation. So they are not the same infrastructure, not the same type of investments. Now, let's say also looking at the previous questions, so the scope of your project must be renewable energy generation. you can include in the description of your project also other elements related to grid connection or related to transmission, for example, but let's say be aware that this will not be part of the CBRS project description. If there is, let's say, a transmission component, perhaps, let's say, what we can accept, if you look also at the current call for works and studies under CBRS, is that if you want, let's say, to study the integration of the generation part with the grid connection or transmission part, it might make sense, and under certain conditions, let's say, you might, let's say, apply for funding of studies if that refers to the integration of the generation and the transmission. But let's say it is subject really, let's say, to certain conditions, so to say. So to reply to the question whether you submit to CBRS, you apply to PCI, it is, let's say, we are really looking at fundamentally a different type of scope between the two windows. So there are, let's say, some caveats how these two windows can, interplay, but they are very limited. Are preliminary studies? No.
Okay, for the next question is about preliminary studies, whether there are requirements for CBRS status, similar to CBRS status being a requirement for works and studies. So maybe you refer to the open call on preparatory studies. There is indeed a running call. This is not a requirement, so you can apply for preparatory study, or and then later on, once you have the data you needed, apply for CBRS status. At the moment you consider the most the best moment, so you have enough data for your CBA, for example, or you can, and we do have examples of projects that just submitted directly for CBRS status because you consider that you have enough information to build up your case, set up your CBA, the counterfactual, etc. So the preparatory study call, which is now running in parallel, it's an extra help to make you to help you make the last mile to get to the status, so to say, and you are free to use it or not. It's really really entirely up to you. So the next question, it's about Annex 4, which is the annex related to the do not significant harm, and in general related to the environmental effects of the project. Here we stay quite flexible. We want to have an understanding of these elements at as early as possible, so that in case you are selected for status, we can help you steering, or we can help you identify what are the eventual most problematic aspect of your project, and these are followed up in the later stage. Now, it really depends on the project setup. In principle, in practice, all projects have to respect the fundamental principle of do not significant harm. Now, how do they go along with these principles? It really depends on a specific case, and it's most likely that at the stage of the status, you don't have yet the elements to answer really concretely. And one important objective of having this Annex 4 already at the status is also to raise awareness of applicants of that these are aspects that will be, of course, very important for the implementation of your project. But we understand that it's very preliminary. Now we can also dig further on the questions to maybe we can find some concrete example and come back to you also in writing in FAQ if that could be considered useful. All right, so we see no more question so far in Slido, so hopefully we have been as clear as possible, but of course, again, as I said, during the break and during the second part, don't hesitate to keep on posting your questions. We will try to answer them as extensive and as detailed as possible also during the second and last Q&A session that will take place at the end of this morning. Now it's time maybe for 15 minutes coffee break so that you recharge your battery, and we also do, and you come back with your fresh brain at 11:30 for the more practical aspect on how to avoid mistakes and how to properly use the platform for the submission before the deadline of the call. Thank you very much. Okay, good. All right, welcome back. And we will go through the second part of this info day. We have a good hour to go through more practical, more into details of the forms of the platform after my first presentation, and then recall what are the deadlines, what is the overall planning, so what is going to happen in the next months and in 2024. And again, we have another slot for Q&A, so as I said before, don't hesitate to post your question. And by the way, there is a question, maybe we start, there was a question during the break, so I take it quickly. So maybe you can go on the Slido. Sorry about that. So we have a question on CO2 project, which changed a bit. So in general, I don't know if it is a specific to the technology, but maybe CO2 capturing project. Is it eligible in CBRS? We need to really see the details of the project you have in mind, but in general, it's difficult to imagine how CO2 capturing could be considered one of these additional components, or especially in the sense on how CO2 capturing could be considered ancillary to the RES installation, because usually, for sure, you may need a grid connection. Usually you need, you may need a storage technology that can be considered ancillary and necessary for your RES application, RES installation. But when it comes to the CO2 capturing, so carbon capture storage, that it's a little bit more difficult to imagine it as part of an additional component of the project. So I would say, in principle, this doesn't fit the CBRS program, but you may have a specific case in mind. Feel free to post it. And then we go back to the PowerPoint, and please keep continuing posting your question. We'll get back to that in an hour or a bit earlier. And we will look at now how to draft good proposals. These are more collection of tips starting from the learning and the lessons learned of the first two calls. And we'll go one by one in order to maximize the possibility that you would not run into the same mistakes of some of your predecessors. So you increase the chances of submitting a complete and high quality proposal. So first thing is about the emissivity eligibility, or the preliminary check, as we called it in the previous presentation. There is one main reason for ineligible project or incomplete. This is really the aspect to take into account, is the missing cooperation agreement or the missing declaration from the country involved. We do have cases, we had cases of projects that were missing the declaration from the countries, so all countries involved or some of the countries involved. We need to have the declaration from all the countries directly involved in the project. So if it is a joint project with physical cross-border between two bordering countries, we need to have the declaration where at least country A and country B clearly states the willingness to enter into a cooperation agreement and that they support the project. I already said it many times in the first part, but it's really important because obviously if you miss that one, regardless of the quality of your project, you will not be able to be selected for CBRS status. You need to have the declaration from the country, and you have a network of contact points in the of member states in the CBRS webpage. Really, please make use of them. As soon as you have anything on your project, starting from a first idea or something more developed or something extremely mature, whatever is the stage, as soon as you can get in touch with your member states or with the member states involved in the project, so it can be, of course, at least normally two, or one plus a third country, it depends, of course. But do it, and if you don't have already a contact established, the contact point list that you find in the website or the CBRS or CINEA website is the entry point. So do contact them. It will be very, very helpful to indeed make a step forward. And we really should avoid a situation where you submit a project and say one of the countries is not really familiar or even aware of it, simply because you lose completely your chance to compete to become a CBRS project. So that's the first message I want to say, and it's the main message about the admissibility eligibility. Now, looking at the content, we were quoting it before, soundness of the project. It's the first element that is evaluated. So the first thing I'd like to stress is the consistency. This is a typical case. So you have especially 3 documents. Well, the platform, the application form that you will submit, you will directly fill in online, and the Annex 1 and the Annex 2. So the Annex 1, I repeat, is the CBA calculation tool, and the Annex 2 is the narrative part. Obviously, the elements that are in these 3 sources shall be consistent. There cannot be that you have a total capacity expected of a project in the application form and another figure in Annex 2, for example. Then it becomes very complicated for the, well, first of all, it's a sign of, low quality, but it becomes very complicated for the assessors to understand what is the true value. So ensure consistency between the 3 elements. Then be complete. We were talking about background information, market elements, which are important to understand the content. But if I should put a hierarchy between these elements, of course, we need to really know about the technical specification of the project. What is the technology? What is the envisaged location? And we know that a location might not be completely settled at the stage of status. That's fine, fair enough. Just indicate it when it's not completely settled for this or that reason. For example, because you need to still go through studies with seabed studies, for example, or you need to go through an environmental impact assessment, or any other elements, or you need to develop further the studies related to the engineering and the setup of the project, which will have an impact on the location. All these elements are absolutely understandable. It just need to be clear and clearly explained in the application form. What is the business model of your project? What are the sources of revenues that you expect? What are your assumptions behind the business model? So, for example, what are you assuming in terms of price of the electricity, for example? Is it your own calculation? Is it your own study? Well, attach the study. Is it a reference standard scenario from publicly available sources, be it, for example, IRENA or other public sources? Quote them and put a link to the study you refer to it. These type of elements are very important for the evaluator to understand the full reasoning of the project, and then and be as precise as possible. So especially for the data, you take your data from somewhere, and it can be internal or internal, it can be project specific. You may refer to the general condition of the market, so you sort of extrapolate the condition for your specific project, taking the reference of what is happening for similar technology in that location, for example. So these are all possibilities. They are all legitimate as long as these are clear and that that you explain where it comes from. And if it is an internal sources or your own calculation, give the background calculation. So because it's very important that these are verifiable. So and use the additional annexes button or spot in the submission platform that Teresa will guide you through in the following PowerPoint. Now, in the overall soundness of the CBA, typical case, typical source of misunderstanding or flaws in the application we have seen so far, it's indeed the counterfactual, because often the assumptions behind are not really explained or not justified. So you can choose, as Vasil was explaining, you can choose to go for a standardized counterfactual. That's the privileged scenario, or you can explain that this is not possible. For example, you have two countries cooperating about a wind offshore project, and one of two countries is contributing and is landlocked, has no access to the sea. Well, it would be impossible to have a counterfactual based on the contributing country, which is landlocked, simply because he has no access to the technology. So in that case, you need to think about a project-specific counterfactual, which can be, for example, located in the contributing country, but with a different technology. Or another setup. It's not written in stone. It's up to you to think about what is most rational and reasonable in your case, and explain it and argue it. So explain really what is the reasoning behind on the different choices of the CBA. Next to that, and so to explain the reasoning, you will use mostly Annex 2, so the so-called CBA report. You have all the space. There's no. You have really the space to detail your reasoning there. Now, if we go at the calculation, so the Annex 1, CBA 2, the first thing is to break down your calculation. Don't just indicate, for example, the LCOE calculation and the element number 1 of the CBA, but includes the breakdown. So what is the cost of investment behind that you assume? In the investment behind there, what is the cost for the turbine, for example? What is the cost for the grid connection? Well, grid connection is the element 2, but what are really disaggregate the cost and as much as possible, so that we understand or the expert evaluating will understand what are your assumptions, and if these assumptions are reasonable, then it's a positive element for the evaluation. For example, your P50. So what is the profitability or the efficiency expected for your offshore wind or for your panel, solar panel, or for any other installation? So how do you assume? On which basis? What is the total, the full load of hours expected in the year for the chosen location? If you haven't chosen yet the location specifically, like the specific location, but you know the area, so you have data about the country, what is the full load hours, the average for that technology in that country? So if you don't have, whenever you don't have any project-specific element, see what is the most reasonable proxy, and usually there are always data from the country. For example, the average of the technology, for example. And what is your CO2 price that you assume when you calculate the GHG emission reduction? So there is a reference scenario in the staff working document. Again, you may want to deviate for any specific reason. If you ever do so, explain why and what is your sources, and so on and so forth. So these are really crucial to ensure that at the end of the day, the evaluators will reasonably tell whether the CBA is sound. And to do so, it needs to understand how did you get to that figure. So that's really the main message that I want to give on that. And here, I think I explained, so what are the sources? Really specify your sources. You can put it in the Annex 1, or you can put them in the Annex 2, wherever you feel is best. But if it's your own sources or internal sources, share your sources. So you can always attach an internal study, for example, and be assured that in any case you have the possibility to indicate what is confidential in your application. So there is a specific session for that. We'll go for that. So you can pinpoint really the confidential elements, and they will be strictly used for the evaluation only. So common mistake in the application form in the platform, there is, in general, it is straightforward. You will see it in Teresa's presentation. She will guide you through really step by step. It is a very, I think, very user-friendly platform. So far, we didn't have really trouble in understanding. There is one aspect to keep in mind, and that's the one that I want to stress. It's in bullet point 1 of this slide. Is there is a question of which is the cooperation mechanism you want to base on. Pay attention there, because whatever choice you make, it may enable or disable basically half of the application form. So section 4 and section 5, we'll see it later on. So if so far all projects that we have supported are joint projects. Joint project means a new project that will be built via the CBRS with also the CBRS support. So new installation that entails 2 or more member states and 1 or more member state and 1 or more third country. In the case, for example, of a project where you have 2 distant member states that cooperate, and the project is fully implemented in member state A, and member state B is there to support, provide, for example, financial support, and his interest is to get, for example, statistical transfer out of the implementation of the project. Okay, this case is a joint project because you are building a new project. Then, of course, the ultimate goal of country B is the statistical transfer. But the project is a joint project because you are building a new installation. The statistical transfer is only when there is no new project. The 2 countries want to enter into a cooperation in order to exchange statistics against money for already produced or being produced renewable energy electricity. Okay, this is very important because if you tick the box statistical transfer, you will not be able to insert important parameters that are included in section 4 and 5, and Teresa will guide you through. Incomplete application form in section 5, it's partly linked to the mistake of the wrong cooperation mechanism, but sometimes we do have right cooperation mechanism chosen, but really incomplete information about the location and implementation schedule. Again, the location, it might be that it's not yet decided, but you may have scenarios, or at least you have hypotheses of location. Please include them. There can be changes afterwards, even once the project is eventually selected. So it's not something that will bind you forever if there's any, of course, unless there is a radical change of the project. Unjustified counterfactual scenario, where simply you take the project takes an assumptions without explaining it. Then unverifiable CBA calculation is what I insisted before. So give the detail, and maybe a common mistake is that the applicant give the details of the calculation, but it's a hard-coded image. So it's like a screenshot of an Excel, and the expert cannot verify the formulas behind. And often you need this type of verification to understand the plausibility and the soundness of the calculation. And last is the sources, which I said several times. So really explain your sources. If they are not explained, the expert can simply take it as a value, a face value, but it's very difficult then to state that everything is plausible, because we don't know where things are coming from. And with that, I think we are done with the key messages. We'll look at the platform, Teresa, and then the planning, and then we will see if we have more questions in the last session. So, Teresa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gianluca, and hello from my side. In the following, I will guide you through the process of submitting your proposal via the online portal. We have developed like a portal specifically for submitting CBRES status applications. But before you can use this platform and start your application, it's very important that you create an EU login account. You might be aware with the EU login system from other applications or other services. EU login is widely used. But if you don't know yet how to set up an EU login account, and you don't have one yet, you need to set it up, and you will find the information on our call page as well, on our CINEA website, where you have a guidance document on how to use EU login. But when you click on the link on the number 1, it will guide you to the EU login page, and there you have either the possibility to sign in or to create a new account. If you have to create a new account, you have to put in your details, first name, last name, and an email address. And be aware that if you're creating the EU login account, first the email that you are using should be one where you can access this email address or the inbox of this email address. And also, in case you are planning to edit their application with several people, it's also something to consider beforehand with what email address or EU login account you are creating the application, so you can share the email address, EU login account, and password with other people who might want to edit the application. So once you've created your account, in that case, you will receive a confirmation email to your mailbox, and this is describing the next steps on how to do it. And once you have your EU login account, you can log in and yeah, submit or edit, start an application in our CBRES submission platform. So in order to access to the submission platform for the CBRES status, you will find, first you would find the information on our call page on the CINEA website. There we have one section which says how to apply, and you will find the link in there. We also have the link in the presentation further on, and I can yeah, tell you again once this is the case, but you have several places where you can find the link to the CBRES submission platform. You also have a user manual which is guiding you to the application step by step, and also this one you will find on our CINEA website for on the call page. So you have, as you see there, there's a screenshot. You have lots of useful documents for this call, like the legal framework. You have the mandatory annexes, and under useful documents you find, for example, here the submission platform user manual. You also find the EU login tutorial in case you're not aware for it. And if you click on this submission platform user manual, the user manual opens, and I will guide you through some steps now. So once you have clicked on the CBRES submission platform link, you will land on the page of the submission platform, and what you need to do is create an application and select a call. This would be the currently open call, so this one you have to select. I've also tried it myself. Sometimes also just already opens automatically, so it could be that what you see here under step 3 could also open automatically. That depends a little bit. But in any case, you select the currently open call, and then you can create a new application. So a pop-up window will open, and you can fill in the name of your project and your project acronym. We don't have a specific format on that, so we don't have a naming convention, let's say, for your project title and for your project acronym. But yeah, I would choose something recognizable also then and matching for the title and the acronym. And then once you have filled in that, you click on Save. And once you have done that, you have already, let's say, created the first step of your application. The application exists in the system, and you can edit it. So in order to edit it and find your application, you can, in case you have several, you can put in your project name, for example, in the search box, and search for your project. But I think in most cases it will be quite visible for you, because it will be the only one for you visible in the list. You have two options to edit. Either you're clicking on the project ID, or you click under Actions and then on Edit Application. And once you have done that, you are in your application. That's what you see here under the number 2. You see like the whole different sections of your application. And then you can click on the different sections in it in order to edit its content. So here you see the different sections of your application: project, project promoter, cooperation mechanism, project general information, location and implementation schedule, project cost, sensitive information, annexes. And we have done it also like this in our presentation, which you will receive later after the info day, and which will also be available on our info day page, so that you could, for example, in the presentation, click on the different section, and it would guide you directly in our presentation on the specific subsection. So let's start with the first subsection. So this is the information about the project. You had already created the project name and the project acronym, but if you have already a website, that, for example, is something to put in here. And you can, in all the section, you will find this edit button that you need to click in order to be able to fill in or edit this specific section. And then just make sure that you're using the save button, also regularly in between, because I think it's at around 30 minutes that the system will automatically go to sleep a little bit, let's say. So make sure you always save your section in between, so that you don't have unsaved works. So just a reminder, here incomplete sections are marked in red. So you see here an example in the right corner how it would look like if something is not filled in, and if something is filled in, then it's green. So the next section would be the project promoter details, and if you click on the add button, you can add the different project promoters. So for example, you could always you start with add, you select, for example, the legal name and the legal status, for example, private or public. You select also if this project promoter that you're adding is like a coordinator or like a normal project promoter. But for all of your projects, you need to have, for every project, you need to have one of the project promoters who is the coordinator. So keep that in mind when creating the project promoters in your proposal. And then you can, for every project promoter that you're creating, you can add contact persons. And there you can add as many contact persons as you like. And once you're complete with filling out all the details about one project promoter, you click on the save button, and then you can then you will see already the first one under one in the first line, and then you could add another one, fill out the details again, and that you can also, there is no limits. We have at least, it should be at least 2 member states, because that's the core of our program, but in case you have more, then add them here. Let's go to the section of the cooperation mechanism. So again, here, in order to fill it out, you have to edit it, and here you have the possibility of choosing the cooperation mechanism that you are choosing for your project. And it's also important here to specify at what stage of the development of the cooperation mechanism you are at. So you have the possibility, well, you not only have the possibility, you need to fill out section 3.2 and provide us with more details about the chosen cooperation mechanism. What's here very important, and Gianluca has already covered this also in his presentation and made you aware of the fact that choosing the cooperation mechanism here has consequences also on how much information different cooperation mechanisms ask for. So be very aware which one you're choosing. As we said before, from our experience or from what has been submitted before so far, it has always been a joint project. And in case you're having a statistical transfer project, then you would in the end of the platform, or in the end of the application form, not to be asked to fill out sections 5 and 6, and those sections will be disabled. But if you click here on joint projects, you have to fill out the sections 5 and 6. Under 4, you have the project general information, and yeah, it's quite some information that needs to be provided in here. For example, the estimated generation, the emission savings, and here it's very important, another aspect that Gianluca mentioned before, that you make sure that everything that you put in here in the application form is consistent with your annexes 1 and 2. So again, you save in between the information that you're providing. Let's come to the location and implementation schedule. The section 5.1 requires you to map the location of your project on a GIS interface. When you see this dialog box on the left side, and when using this one, you have different possibilities. You can either, and that we are going to see in shortly after, add infrastructure, but you also have the possibility with this dialog box to upload a file, for example, from a GIS file. And you also have a possibility of, once you have created something later in the map, to export your data. So that's basically some kind of a menu box with which you have different possibilities at the later stage. Here we go a little bit more into detail on how you could then add your infrastructure on the map in our submission portal. First, you should select a location, and you may use the search bar in here and put, for example, an address. That might not always be so easy if it's somewhere located, let's say in the ocean. So you can also zoom in the map and find the location. And then once you have narrowed down the location of your project, you can use in the dialog box the possibility of adding infrastructure. And once you click this button, you have a menu on the right side where you can have, like, you see the different options of adding infrastructure. And we will see this in the next slide. There you have different possibilities. Indeed, so for example, a point infrastructure where you just say, on this specific point, I will put a hydro power plant, but you have also the possibility of creating or drawing in here a line infrastructure. So yeah, you find more information on how to do this exactly here in our presentation, but also on the manual. depending on what you want to do in your project. There's here you see different ways on how to draw the map. For example, also with a polygon infrastructure, and you can select the infrastructure type and then draw it. You see here there are quite some possibilities. Yeah, just make use of it to draw your project, or to present it to us as as good as possible, as detailed as it's possible for you. Next slide. You have also the possibility afterwards to, once you've created the first bit of infrastructure in here, you can also edit it afterwards. So once you select or if you unselect the Add Infrastructure button, you will also have the possibility to click on your infrastructure and edit it, or, for example, delete it. So yeah, let's go to the next section, which are the project costs. Here again, you can use the edit button to edit the information. Here, for example, we have a question on if you had received CEF support from preparatory studies. It's just for an information purpose. We have already had this question beforehand. Having had support for preparatory studies is not a condition to apply for the CBRES status. Next slide. Next slide is information that Gianluca mentioned before in his presentation. Here you have you need to tell us if there's any commercially sensitive information in here, and in case you click yes, if you click no, nothing else happens. If you click yes, you have the possibility to tell us in sections 2 and 6, 7.2 and 7.3. You have the possibility to telling us exactly what information are sensitive and should not be shared, either with a CBRES member state group or with the public. Under section 8, you need to upload the different annexes that are for once under section 8.1. Those are the mandatory annexes that you have to submit: the CBA Excel tool, the CBA report, the written declaration of participating countries, and the sustainability and do not significant harm statement. And then under section 8.2, you also have the possibility of uploading other annexes. Those are for once in section 8.2.1, for example, GIS data, maps, or other information about the project. So, for example, if you have like different scenarios for the exact location, that could also be, for example, a possibility here to upload it under this section. And you also have the possibility under those other annexes to upload, as Gianluca has mentioned, for example, a study that you're referring to in your CBA, and that would be interesting to knowing your sources for the data you have used in the CBA. Then in our submission platform, under the section useful links, you will find page to DG Energy, but you will also find our CBRS status call page, where you have all the information again and explanations about our call and your application. Before you submit your application, and that's what you do under check and submit. For once, the check will allow you and will mark all the fields that are not yet complete. So it's for you also a way in between to go to the section and have a look what's highlighted, so that you know what's still missing and needs to be filled out before you can submit your application. But you also have the possibility there to download your application, and that you can do as many times as you wish between in the process. Download the application and be able to share this Word file, for example, within your consortium and with other people who are involved in the project. Once you think that your application is complete and you see that there are no validation errors anymore, you can press the submit button. Yeah, indeed. It's, as you see, it takes some time to make everything complete. So allow yourself some time for that, and definitely avoid to start your application process too close to the deadline to avoid technical issues. And once you had submitted, the green message that you see here will confirm that you have submitted your application, and then you can close the submission window. And we received this questions couple of times. Can I amend and view my application? Yes, and we would even encourage you to start your application as soon as possible. So you can just start right away today to have a look, because you are able afterwards, even after you click the submit button, it is, let's say, submitted in the system, but it will be available for you to edit and also to delete if you wish, edit as many times as possible, but you could also delete and start a new application. And basically, once then you have reached the submission deadline, it just makes sure that you have clicked the submission button before, and then it's automatically submitted. But you can, until our deadline has come, you can edit your application. So it's a good idea, we say, to start very early, even this week, next week, to just have a look, fill out things, and if you run into problems, you can also, of course, always have the possibility of contacting us if there's a technical problem with editing and submitting your application. And I will also cover this coming presentation about the indicative timeline. So the call opened on the 7th of November and will close on the 6th of February next year, 2024. And then afterwards, the evaluation period will start. The experts will analyze your proposals, and we expect the evaluation period to end at around March, April. And then we expect that all applicants are going to be informed by letter of the results of their proposals at around May, June. So you will either receive a positive outcome message or a negative outcome message about your application. And then we foresee the entry into force of the CBRS list 2024 in October 24. You might wonder why there's so much time in between. There's also the European elections next year taking place in June, and we definitely, with the entry into force of the list, we have to first wait until the elections are done, and then we can start what we call the non-objection period afterwards at around mid-July, and then it will take a while, but we expect then the list to be able to enter into force in October 24. Which next slide? Which will then be part of our whole upcoming timeline then. So we have the entry into force of the list, giving the projects that are newly on the CBRS status list also the possibility already to apply for the call for works and studies that is expected for October 2024, and then we expect the results of the works and studies call in May 2025. So you have already an idea what could come up after your application and in case your application has been successful. Here you find still the relevant links, and I've mentioned it before. So you have, for once, the CBRS call page on our website, and you have here also the direct link to the CBRS submission portal, where you, once you have created your EU login or you have already your EU login, then you can start your application on the CBRS submission portal.
Thank you, Teresa. That leads us to the very last part of the Info Day, which is the Q&A session. But before that, don't forget about the feedback survey of, so the satisfaction survey, if you like, regarding this Info Day. So it will take you really few minutes, but it's very precious input from your side, especially in times of remote connection. So we don't see body language, so it's good that you take a minute or two to give us your feedback on what did you find interesting, useful, what you would have liked to spend more time on, and so on and so forth. Any suggestion are more than welcome, and we do make use of them each time when we develop our service. With that, we look at the questions on the Slido, so please keep on writing your question if you have any. There's still time. First question is from Christina about the page limit for the annex. So mainly it's Annex 2 is where you will have to write most of it. And here I have a very good news for you, which is also a rare one on that, as usually all templates entail lots of sometimes a little bit draconian character limits. There are no limits in the annex for this call. Doesn't mean you have to write a full encyclopedia. Please try to strike a balance, but you can take the space you need to explain your case. Yes, please.
Yeah, just to add on this one, also you don't have a page limit, you have a size limit for uploading the file, so pay attention to that. It's 50 megabyte for per file, so make sure that whatever you create is within the size limit, otherwise you can't upload your annex in the submission platform.
All right. question about the location. So there is the feature to use the GIS map in the portal. In case of location not yet finalized, how to fill it in? Question is from Christina. Try to strike a balance, or take the proxy, you know, the closest proxy. So depends on your project, but I would say that you can use the polygons instead of points, depending on the type of project and the technology. And the polygons allows you to go as big as you want, so it can be at the level of city. That's perfectly fine. I presume your installation won't be in the city, so you will have to pinpoint the area of the expected area. So I think the best strategy is indeed to use the polygon. But of course, if you haven't decided the location, you can either put the hypothetical or the location who is the most probable. So you can put a point. So you will be able anyhow to change it afterward if needed, or you use a polygon to indicate an area. And then could a legal entity participate as coordinator in one project and as promoter in another project? That's perfectly possible. You can, therefore, one single entity can participate in more than one project. Yes, that is, and in any form. So it could even be that the same legal entity proposes 2 different projects, and each time as a coordinator. That's possible. There's no specific restriction for that. Is it possible for 2 members of a consortium to work in the application simultaneously on the platform? I think technically this is possible, but you might enter into a little bit of conflicts. Maybe on this also I noted down to double check exactly how the system reacts. We need to discuss or have more information from the IT service. But I would assume that you may have a little bit of trouble in saving. So, but we'll come back to that. Okay, no more questions so far on Slido. Give you some more minutes to think about it.
Just perhaps to add on the last question about working simultaneously, definitely a way to circumvent this, that there's a possibility for you all the time to download the current state of your file in a Word document. That way you could circulate it. People could change things that are in there, for example, track changes, or add in there. And then one dedicated person is then filling in the information in the platform. That way you definitely prevent that you're running into problems with the submission platform. That would be a suggestion from my side.
And one point, a link to that. In any case, it is true that the part that you have to fill in directly in the platform, it's fairly limited compared to the rest. So you may also want to centralize indeed this way, and the rest, it's the Annex 1 and Annex 2 notably, will be the part where you will mostly work on, and you should probably work on a shared document that is probably the most efficient. One unrelated aspect that might be interesting to have your signal on from the feedback survey, it's one more reason to fill it in, is we are usually organize a Q&A session closer to the deadline. So a sort of Slido session where you can insert your questions and we reply them live usually 3-4 weeks before the deadline. So in case you may consider this an interesting support, please, you can also signal it via the survey, and we will use it also. We decide usually to do it or not, depending on how many questions we see, how what is the activity around, if there are lots of uncertainties or question doubts from applicants. So we decided later on, but also your feedback at this stage or any stage later, it's most welcome. Okay, it's 12:30. I see no question in slide so far. So recalling the fundamental that all we should know by heart now. The deadline it's in February, 6th of February. You have to use this platform that you'll find in this various presentation, not the EU grant funding and tender portal, for those who are familiar with that one, but this specific CBRS platform. You will find all information in the call page. This info day is recorded, and we will share in the event page also the recording, as soon as we have it. It takes a few days, and the PowerPoint as well. We will update the Q&A document, which is already available in the call page. If we see that there are some uncovered questions from the Q&A that were raised today, and I think there's always a few ones to add. So stay tuned. In the coming week or two, you will find an updated version of the Q&A. And so the channel is always open. We have a functional mailbox. So if you have questions, doubts, that you can find the answers via the FAQ, via the call text, via the various guidance document or PowerPoint or recording of this info day. Just get in touch with us via email, and if there are questions that were not already answered, we will also add them in the form of Q&A, so that in the form of FAQ, sorry, so that everybody is informed about anything, any extra information we may provide. Having said that, get in touch with your member state as soon as possible. I think I said it 20 times today, and 21 is not too much. Go ahead and look at the templates and the documents, see what is requested in terms of CBA calculation, start collecting all your data that you need, and good luck with the work. We are looking forward to see many good and promising applications in February, and we stay in touch if you need us via the functional mailbox. Many thanks, everyone.